This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
If you're out there faking it to make it, some of the worst advice ever in history is probably
Yeah,
fake it till you make
yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
Because I mean, people see through you if
yeah.
you're not genuine, if you're not authentic.
This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by TD Smyers. TD is a career servant leader with over 30 years of top-level executive experience across three major economic sectors. He is an executive coach specializing in succession. His clients include top executives and prospective top executives from across the country. TD is a retired U.S. Navy captain who had a successful 31-year military career, and I am excited to have him on the show to learn from his experiences. So, TD, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's an honor to meet you, sir. And we've had a long discussion before we pressed record. Two Navy guys catching up. You being in P3s, me being on submarines, and those who understand anything about the Navy. These were sort of we were cat and mouse back in the
Yeah,
day. So,
different
and we
sides of the surface of the water. That was pretty cool.
yeah, it's very cool. And we never liked the P3 aircraft because they could always find us and we could never get away from them. So, so but it's an honor to have you, sir, on the show.
Thanks, John.
And yeah, I'm excited to talk about what you're doing today with respect to the coaching that you're doing. But I
Sure.
kind of want to dive in a little bit about how you and why you've established your coaching career around the idea of boldness. Now, you say that your coaching practice is surrounded on the concept of boldness in leadership.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that. How do you define boldness in leadership?
Well, I think for me, a lot of it goes back to the Navy and the fact that, when I first got into the Navy, went to the Naval Academy in 1980 and graduated in 84, and trying to kind of understand where the Navy fit into the military and was learning all that kind of stuff. And as I learned about the expeditionary forces, that the Navy and the Marine Corps are there, and sometimes they got to operate out of bases that, weren't there yesterday. And sometimes they have to operate in conditions that there's not a set of rules for. And I started to be really comfortable in that space. I understood what we did. I understood the differences between that and kind of a garrison force like the Army and the Air Force that operates with TACDOC and a really strong set of doctrine and a strong set of rules. And so I think that taught me the value of being able to sense and respond in an environment, to encounter something that seems insurmountable and then figure out a way to get past it, and to operate in an environment where nobody's done this before and
Mm,
there aren't really solid rules. And so being raised in the Navy in an environment like that, when I eventually retired from the Navy and got into nonprofit management, I brought that same kind of a thought process, that same kind of ethos. It's like, okay, don't tell me we can't do this. Let's talk about how we do it, and don't tell me how we have done it. Let's look at ways we can do it better.
mm.
And so I found that that was a pretty good thing to bring into nonprofits from my time in the Navy.
That's fantastic. And you break down boldness into three, I think, distinct characteristics. Is that right?
Well, I do. Boldness is sometimes a tough thing to define. A lot of people throw words at it like courage, moral courage is a thing. I have a blog post and I wrote about this recipe for bold that talks about these different things that you throw into a bold soup, essentially. But the bottom line is this: it's the ability to overcome fear and to accomplish things that don't seem like they can be accomplished right
Mm,
now, right? And so the characteristics that I've kind of built my coaching practice around are optimizing a leader's character, confidence, and clarity. right? The character being who they are. And we've seen what happens when there's a lapse of character, right? I mean, just this morning, I was reading about an Air Force officer out of Eglin who's being relieved from his command 3 days before his change of command. And I'm like, man, that there's a story there, and
Yeah.
it's probably not a good one, right? So, and we read all the time about what happens with leaders who display a lapse of character. You might be following some of the things that are going on right now in Congress, where the Secret Service chief, Director Cheadle, is being just grilled by Congress on failures surrounding the attempted assassination of former President Trump. And we're looking at these things as the answers that she's giving, and just sometimes I'm looking at them, just burying my head, going, my.
Hmm.
It's so character is a very personal thing that leaders need to get right. The other kind of pillars are confidence, and I kind of operate on the understanding that confidence is grounded in competence, right? You need to be good at what you do so you can move forward boldly and do it. And then finally, it's clarity. What is my role? And what's the role of all my teammates? And how do I communicate with clarity? Right. So in the way that I coach, if I can help a leader get their arms around their very authentic leadership, optimizing their character, their confidence, and their clarity, then I think they can do great things.
Yeah, I love that you stress that you start with character, and it's one of the things that what's interesting is we spend a lot of time teaching. I think competence. We do teach a lot of, at least with, I got a chance to talk to a lot of graduate students, and we teach them, well, mostly in business, and we teach them accounting, we teach them operations, we teach them the legal side of it, the human resource side. But what we don't teach is character skills. We don't, we sort of expect that what your mom and dad taught you that, or you learned that in when you went to Catholic school or something, right? So
Yeah.
but we don't really stress character. We stress, we're teaching you skills. We're
Yeah.
teaching you applied skills. And an area that we don't teach, and is one of my frustrations, we don't teach leadership either. We teach, and it's one of the things that I loved about being in the military, is we actually learned leadership. Like, you went to
Oh,
the Naval Academy, I was ROTC, but leadership was part of our training,
oh
and it
yeah.
was part of our curriculum,
And think about
which
it
is we don't do enough.
when you
Yeah.
were a young JO,
Yeah.
you had to go through training to be like a squad leader, right? Or a branch officer. And then you got to do it for about 18 months and mess it up and break it and do stupid things and do some good things and meet your chief and learn, right? And then they put you into the next level of training to
Yep.
be a division officer, right? And so you had this, what I call this continuum of leadership, where you got a chance to get formal training, get OJT, then get formal training for the next section, get some more OJT. And I mean, all the way up to when I was a captain in '06 and an installation commander, I went to formal training and then got a chance to do it. So I've always sought to bring that kind of a thought of this continuum of leadership development
Yeah.
to everything I've done since then.
I love that. I always say that, if you want to learn leadership, you have to be a leader. Like, you have to do it. And I love the fact that the military gives you a little bit of responsibility, and you learn it. And you make a lot of mistakes, they give you more, and you
Oh
learn
yeah.
it, and you make a lot of mistakes, you give you more. And I love that aspect of it. And so one of the things that I loved about the military is that the people above me had walked in my shoes before me, right? They had done the same things I had done, right? So there was instant respect for someone that was an '06, that was a base commander. Like, I knew that that person had done everything that I had done in my short time in the Navy, versus sometimes in the civilian world you might have a boss that is not experienced, and doesn't have that progressive growth in their career.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know how you were when you were coming in as a young officer, but I was scared. It was,
I was
you know,
petrified.
right? It's like, man, I've got to conform to this culture. It's funny, and that is a kind of a difference, right, between how we were raised at arriving at our first job, right, our first vocation, uh, as opposed to how maybe some folks in the new generation, Gen Z, are arriving in their workplaces. I mean, I arrived and I was expected to conform to that culture now, and I
Mm.
had to figure that out. How do I conform to that culture? What does it mean to wear this patch, to be part of this unit? And that every waking minute was spent trying to match that, to fit in, to be part of that esprit de corps. And I think now some of the I don't know, some of the attitude has changed a little bit. It's kind of like now, okay, how do we attract the best people to our organization? How can we be very open and accepting of everybody and everything? And it seems that there's a lot more focus on the individual, where there used to be a lot more focus on the organization, you know. Um, and I can see a lot of that in terms of kind of pursuing unity
Hmm.
in organizations now. We have definitely done a lot of advancements in how we show respect for individuals and their uniqueness. And I think that's great. I think the next step, though, is to kind of forge the kind of unity that folks like you and I were privileged to experience with that patch on our shoulder for the ship, for the unit we were part of. And everybody tried to be what they could, to be the best value they could be to the team, to the group, serving something larger than themselves. And I think there's great opportunity for us, as we come off of the kind of introduction of DEI principles into the workplace, in harnessing that now for unity and taking the next step in that evolution.
I think you're correct. I mean, I know at least on a submarine, there is a high level of positive peer pressure too, because you had the lives of your shipmates in your hands, right? So one mistake, everyone perishes, right? So
Yeah.
similar to aircraft in the air, right? One mistake, you all, not one person goes, that you all die, right? So
Yeah.
everything has to be done with precision, and you have to know that everyone around you is competent and knows what to do. And so there was a high level of positive peer pressure to be competent in your job and to prove
Yeah.
your competency to your shipmates. And I think that's something that I took into the civilian world thinking that, well, it's going to be the same thing when I came into the corporate life, but it wasn't at all. It was like there was no one held anyone accountable to excellence. And it was a little
Yeah.
surprising to me when I came into the corporate world.
Yeah, I've experienced that same thing. And if I can tell you a quick, kind of funny story that's not necessarily about how important we prioritize competence, but culture. So when I moved from the Navy, I was a Navy flyer. I was a installation commander. I commanded a joint air base. So I step out of that role, and I'm now in the American Red Cross, and we're doing an exercise. And the exercise is a pretty common exercise. It's a disaster assessment. So what they've done is we go into real neighborhoods in Dallas, and in the neighborhoods, in the yards, are these pictures of homes. So we're supposed to go and assess, not based on the actual home that's sitting on that lot, but the picture of the home, what they need. Right. And this is an exercise we do. And we were doing it in the American Red Cross with an organization called Islamic Relief. And when I got back I went back into the field and worked with Islamic Relief and worked with the ARC. And when I got back to the headquarters, one of my disaster folks, his name is Neil. He's a great guy, but he comes up to me and he says, "TD, we have a situation." And I said, "Oh, what is it?" I stop everything, right? So, what is it, Neil? I told them to order culturally sensitive food, but they ordered these sausage pizzas. And he's looking at me and I said, "Okay, Neil, come here. I come from Navy flying. If you tell me there's a situation that somebody's life is at risk or something really bad is about to happen," I said, "just order more pizzas, man."
Yeah.
Order some more pizzas. So he orders more pizzas. In the meantime, we walk into the debrief room, and who's chowing down on all the sausage pizzas? Yeah, all
Oh,
all
that's
the folks
funny.
from Islamic Relief. So it was this difference in temperature, right, on things that I kind of had to get used to a little bit. But what you described in terms of the difference in prioritizing competence, oh man, I mean, we were privileged to live in that structure, I think, that demanded it.
Mm.
As you were talking earlier, we all had to live up to that, and we busted our humps for our careers to try to live up to that, and to move outside and to see where it's so needed. That's kind of motivated me to do what I do now, which is coaching, right? Bringing some of that into this world and contextualizing it within this world using the vernacular terminology of this world, but bringing in those levels of concern and focus on competence. And it's been awesome. I love doing it.
I love it. I love it. So I'm curious, how did you settle on boldness? And again, you talked about character, confidence, clarity being sort
Yeah.
of the underpinnings of boldness. But how did you kind of land on that as sort of being your baseline for coaching clients?
Well, probably some of it has to do with just how I'm wired, and I was kind of the atypical. My wife would tell you I was definitely an atypical military officer because I did. There was I had a certain amount of questioning of authority and things that were happening. I was one of those folks that would ask why that's happening, and I was a little more, I guess, obnoxious isn't the right word, but maybe belligerent a little bit. But what that taught me was I got answers. I mean,
Mm,
I got to the root of what I was concerned about, and that emboldened me and empowered me to lead my team to go accomplish the mission. I got pushback, but that was okay. Some people didn't like me, but that was okay. I mean, my team respected me and we moved in places that we might not have moved before. So that kind of taught me the value of boldness. But when I made the transition around 2011, 2012, from the military into the social sector, into nonprofits, I was looking at a world where technology and sociology were changing us at such a rapid pace that if we relied on things we were taught 5 years ago, man, we were overcome by events.
mm.
We were operating on old news and old protocols. And so that kind of taught me that the kind of, I don't know, beneficiary belligerence, right? Where you're asking questions and you're looking for better ways to do things and you're questioning why we're doing things the same way was something that we needed to value across economic sectors. We needed to be challenging these paradigms and challenging these rules. I mean, as soon as rules are great, and rules are necessary. They save lives, right? You all had documents just like we did in naval aviation. We had NATOPS, Naval Air Training and Operating Procedure Standardization, and the saying was that NATOPS was written in blood. Right, everything that was in there because somebody had messed it up, and we needed to put a procedure in there to make sure that nobody else got hurt. So there's a place for rules for sure. But when you also understand the limitations of rules, that as soon as they're written, they're obsolete.
Mm.
Just the rate of change right now makes something that's written, it can't be written in concrete anymore. It has to be written in wet concrete if it is, so you can wipe it out and rewrite it. And you have to be agile. So bringing agility instead of rigidity into executive leadership just kind of became what I saw as what was necessary for people to be successful and for organizations to achieve their mission and market share.
It's interesting that you say that because I did 22 years working for three global companies, and one of the one of the frustrations I had towards the end of my time was the fact that we, as these companies matured, they became more, bureaucratic, and they developed more processes, and they had more layers of management. And so to get anything done required, massive amounts of approval. And again, once you create a large global organization, your goal is to, keep it running essentially. But then you had guys like me, running these businesses, trying to be flexible, like you say, trying to adjust to the winds that are happening in with our competitors, with our customers, and having facing that bureaucracy was very frustrating to, a dynamic, bold leader like I was trying to be. So it was very
Yeah.
frustrating. So I ended up, like, for me, it was, I knew it was time to go. I knew it was time for me to start my own business and leave this world, because I felt like they wanted people who are managers, right, and not leaders. They didn't really want someone who was going to be bold. They wanted
Yeah.
someone that was going to follow the rules. And
So,
that was
so
that was it's interesting. That was my observation, at least.
Well, I had the same experience when I went into the American Red Cross. Again, I had just come out of the Navy, and the Red Cross was doing this 52 card pickup redesign where they had taken these very local autonomous chapters and they were consolidating them into a national enterprise with these regions that were broken up. So at first they were like, we don't know how to run a region. So we're like, great, we'll figure it out, right? So we're wheeling and dealing, we're figuring things out, we're making these logistics change work and putting these protocols in place, and they're all applauding it from the headquarters in DC. And they're going, that's great, you guys keep going. Well, after a couple of years of that, we had all figured out the right way to run regions. So then what did they do? Well, they said, thou shalt run regions this way. And so
Mhm.
it became
Right,
very,
right.
very top down, very bureaucratic. And instead of being a CEO anymore, it's pretty soon I looked up and said, you know what? I kind of feel more like a general manager.
Hmm.
And that really was this, that's what made me kind of vulnerable for the move I would make after that, moving into the United Way structure, which is structured a lot more loosely. It's a network. It's a general network where there are resources that everybody can tap into, but the local leadership is still very autonomous. And
Hmm.
I definitely liked that and leveraged that during my time there to make some pretty wild changes in how United Way did business in my area. So yeah, I
It's
definitely
interesting because I almost feel like, when you're managing your own careers, that you have to find a fit. You have to make sure that you're in a situation where it fits your leadership style. Like I've always been the turnaround guy. I'd go into broken businesses to turn them around. And then like you said, they would standardize things. And then it would, for me, it was like, this is boring. I want to go turn things around. I want to break things. I want to try new things. I want to experiment. So I think it's important in your career that you find an organizational fit with your leadership style. Would you say, would you agree with that?
that's perfectly stated. And you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth. I am a crummy station keeper. I'm a really bad status quo guy because it's very administrative, right? And there are people who have a lot more administrative talent than I do to be able to keep things running smoothly once they're in place and they're efficient and they're effective. I'm the kind of guy that's like, okay, that's not working, so we're not going to do that anymore. Okay, smart ass, what are we going to do? Well, let's try these things, right? And that's me. So I think you're absolutely right. If people are out there listening to this, thinking, you know what, I do feel kind of like a square peg in a round hole here because I keep butting up against the bureaucracy or something, then that could be a pretty strong signal. Maybe it's time to at least consider, a change and
Mm.
and a move. And growth necessitates change. It's like my wife; she's growing some plants right now. She started growing some cucumbers, and the cucumbers outgrow their pots pretty quickly, and we have to migrate them into another environment in order for them to continue to grow and produce. And I think leaders are like that. You can definitely outgrow an environment you're in as you gain momentum and you find yourself. Um, it, the situations, the stories we've been talking about here, it's important to realize that as a young leader, when I was just learning what I was doing, I was incredibly scared. I was incredibly self-flagellating. You're not doing this right. You're not capable. You're not as smart as these people are. Oh, but over time, you start to realize, based on feedback, based on fitness reports that we got in the Navy, based on how people respond to you in the workplace, that you're able to achieve things. It's definitely a learned growth curve.
Yeah.
And as you pick that up, you kind of gain your confidence. You hit your stride. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
pretty powerful.
I agree. I always tell people like the greatest job in the Navy is an O3 lieutenant, where you've been on the ship for like 4 years. You know every valve, you know every procedure, and you're training the new people, and you get to watch the movies at night. You're confident in your abilities. Now you haven't taken that next step, to department head, but you're really good at being a ship driver. And being a lieutenant was the greatest job in the Navy, I thought.
I
So
100% concur. And the gentleman we were discussing earlier, my old executive officer, Mark Fava, who hopefully you wind up having on the show at some point, he just wrote a post about that. Said the best job in the Navy's lieutenant. And it's so true. I mean, for us, it was coming back from a mission and thinking your crew had just kicked it in the butt and you're just smacking hands. And then you walk up and see the other guys on the other crews, the other tacos, the other pilots in command, and you're giving them smack and trash talk and stuff. It, you are at the peak of your tactical proficiency, right?
yeah.
You're young, you're you're presumably smart, or you wouldn't be in that role. You're smart enough to have that role at least, and you've got such bravado that
Yeah.
that you're really with. And yeah, that was a very heady time for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. My son is in the Navy now, and we had a family cruise well last week before last, and you know,
Oh,
I
cool.
was talking to a few of the lieutenants, and they had that same swagger that I had back when I was out. I just thought it was funny. So, well, that's interesting. So, you know, as you work with your clients, as you work with these, you know, people being involved with some sort of a succession, um, when you're training them up on boldness, what are the kind of roles that they're going to be going into? So are these people that are going into smaller companies? Are they going into turnaround situations or
That's a great
yeah.
question. And I've fallen into this wild niche where
Mm,
all of my clients are involved in succession at some point. Either they're brand new CEOs who have just succeeded and I'm
mm,
coaching them to help them get a good start, or they're heads of functions like COOs and CFOs, CIOs who are being promoted into the CEO role, either right now or subsequent. And I'm preparing them for that. So I'm in this space. And what's wild is, although I'm in that space, the industries are so broad.
mm,
One of my clients is a single shop nonprofit where they're the sole employee and they're the head dog, right? On the other end, I'm coaching an individual who's a COO of a large billion-dollar shipping company who's about to be the CEO. So, everything in between.
okay.
And that's kind of uh, I think demonstrative of the fact that leadership is leadership.
Mm,
And you're how you apply that stuff when you're working with a small team of volunteers or a small staff and a board, the competencies are the same, even if you're applying them to, across several continents in a global enterprise. And I think that says something about leadership and how important it is to get it right. You and I were talking about the things that you're taught as a young executive in the corporate world. A lot of it is management. You're taught how to manage, but when it comes to now promoting up to a point where you've got to do something besides manage, you've got to lead.
mm,
That can be scary and daunting if you don't have somebody you can bounce stuff off of and just walk things through and figure it out. And I think that's one thing that I've been told makes my coaching approach a lot different. A lot of coaches have the plan, right? We're going to put you in the plan. We're going to put you in the program. We have this measured approach to how we do everything, and you're going to read these books and you're going to do this homework and that kind of stuff. And the way I approach it is we do a set of assessments so we can figure out how you're wired, how you really lead. A set of values based assessments. What are your values based strengths? And a set of skill based assessments. What are you good at? What are your skill based strengths? And once we've got that, we see kind of how you're wired and we can start working on your authentic leadership. And then it becomes, all right, what are you dealing with now in your life? What's going on at work? What's going on at home? Let's talk about how you can wield your demonstrated strengths, the things we've measured. And, you know, one thing that's important too to note is that I, I run across people all the time that'll tell me, I worked for this woman once and she was amazing. I want to lead like her. And I say, okay, how about this? How about you're inspired by the way she led,
yeah.
but you lead like you,
Yeah.
right? Right. And because if you're out there faking it to make it, some of the worst advice ever in history is
Yeah.
probably fake it till you make
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, people see through you
Yeah.
if you're not genuine, if you're not authentic. And so trying to get people to understand it's good to be motivated by how other people lead. It's good to be inspired by how they lead, but at the end of the day, how you lead has to be based on who you are as a leader, not who they were as a leader. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a central point to how I approach the coaching stuff is authenticity.
I love that. I mean, I think that when it comes to like I've written a few books and you know, you have to find your own voice. You know, you know, there's you can be inspired by other people, but you have to find your own authentic voice as an author, as a podcaster. You find your radio voice, your authentic voice. You know, and how you do interviews. I don't interview like anyone else. I interview the way I do because I found my voice over time. And as a leader, you have to find your own voice. And I think it's really important. And if you're trying to pretend to be someone else or trying to act like someone else, everyone sees through it. We see fake miles away. We can see fake and
Oh,
phony. And when
it,
people are trying to be act like somebody else, it's so. I mean, it's so obvious when you see it.
I think that's very insightful. And I like the way how you put that. You got to find your own leadership voice.
Yeah.
And I tell people, there's a spectrum. And I usually, when I go into a group or even if it's a new one on one coaching session, I'll be like, have you ever worked with somebody who was just full of what Gen Z calls Riz, right? Full of charisma. They charge that hill. We're going to charge that hill. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Have you ever worked for somebody who was just quietly competent that you didn't want to disappoint them? So you busted your ass for them? Yes, I work for somebody like that. Well, you know what? That's the spectrum.
Yeah.
And you're going to fall somewhere in that spectrum, right? In
Yeah.
between those. And that's brilliant because both of these and everything in between are extremely effective leadership techniques. You just got that old saying, like, "Our leaders born or made," kind of thing. We're all born with a set of strengths. Sure, we all the way we're nurtured or natured, we develop these skills, these values, these things that we think are important. But how we wield them, man, that is all learnable.
Mm.
And so to help people, grab hold of these strengths and then harness them to develop their own authentic leadership style, it's brilliant. Hey, have you ever heard of a book called Leadership BS by Jeffrey Pfeiffer?
No.
It's kind of I don't know, it's a shelf book, on leadership. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
the thing about it is he runs down the concept of authentic leadership because he's like, well, you don't want to be coming to work and telling people all the silly things you do in your personal life. And I'm just slapping my head going, authentic leadership isn't about bringing your inner jackass to work. It's about bringing your inner self to work, how you're
Yeah.
wired, and wielding that authentically so that people feel that vibrancy that
Yeah.
authenticity brings, and then they follow, right? That's just kind of how that works.
I love that. I love that. Such powerful advice. I love the idea of finding your own voice, finding your own authentic style. And again, the spectrum is wide, right, in terms of what
Yeah,
makes a great leader. And you have to find what fits well with your personality and your strengths. And when you find that, and that's why. And again, I encourage listeners. This is why you hire a coach, right? They're gonna help you work through that. You're gonna have a person that you can work with, that can help you, find your authentic leadership style, is find out your strengths, find out areas that you need to work on. So, if you're in a leadership role today and you don't have a coach, you don't have a mentor, I highly recommend that you find someone, because it is good to have someone outside of your chain of command that you can talk to and you can help work on the things that you need to work on. So that's a really important.
absolutely.
Yeah, really important. So TD, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners today?
What final message? Okay. So there's a lot of things out there, a lot of ways to measure who you are. Pick one. And I mean, there's dozens of different kinds of assessments, right? Character assessments. I use viacharacter.org to measure values-based strengths, or those character-based strengths, right? That tell you what you care about, what's important to you. I use Clifton Strengths, which used to be called Strength Finders, to measure your skill-based strengths, what you're good at. And then the reason I do both of those is because they play on each other. And where there are maybe waning areas in one or lacking areas in another, I can use the strengths of the other side to reinforce those or grow those. And at some point after you do that, you want to do a 360. So you can see, okay, this is how I think I'm wired, but here's how I'm perceived by the people that are in my area, by the people I work with, my peers, my subordinates, the folks I work for in the organization. All that is really important to the central piece of confidence, and that's self-awareness. Man, who are you? When you know that, it's a superpower. And then you can harness that authenticity in that broad spectrum that you just talked about, John, of leadership. You can find your role in that and where that vibrates with you, and you go forward and lead and do great things in your organization. So I would encourage everybody. That's my formula. Yeah, there you go. You have it. That's probably $1,000 worth of advice right there.
Well, I
But
love it. And, I've had a past guest on there says that, 85% of people think that they are self-aware, and only about 15% of people really are. So the idea
incredibly
of doing,
insightful comment. Yeah.
yeah. So the idea of using character assessment, skill assessment, and then the 360
Yeah.
to really get some hard facts or hard data on who you really are,
Yeah.
I think is really important, so that you are more self-aware. Because one of the worst things I see in leaders is leaders who are not self-aware. They think they're great leaders, they're terrible leaders. Everyone knows they're terrible, but they're not willing to listen to anyone because they think they're so great. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Setting
Yeah,
that foundation is key. Everything you do after that
yeah.
is additive, and everything you do after that's value added if you've done the time to build that foundation of self-awareness. 100%.
I love that. Such great advice, TD. How can our listeners find out more about you and the services you offer?
So I have a site. It was a blog that I wrote called A Bold Leader. And when I decided to do coaching, I needed a business. So I took the site, I took the blog and created aboldleader.com. It's my company. And I'm actually transitioning over to longgametx.com, just like long game, like golf. And that's a group of really talented consultants that I'm going to start working with now in this space. So you can find my information on both sites and dial into that and punch contact TD, and I'd love to be in contact with you.
Absolutely. And we're going to put links in the show notes for all of TD's resources. And again, if something in this conversation that really spoke to you, you want to talk to TD, you want to get a deeper dive maybe into something he said, you understand boldness better, you understand these character, confidence, clarity better, reach out to him. We're going to have links in the show notes. Go ahead and follow those links, reach out to him, ask him a question. And he's happy to answer those questions. And if you're looking for a coach, you're looking for someone that you can, help guide you. Maybe you're going through a transition yourself and you're taking on more responsibility. Reach out, get TD on your team. You're going to need somebody in your corner. Get somebody that's been in the trenches for more than 30 years. That's the kind of person you want on your side. He's going to help you really perfect your leadership approach and help you be a more bold leader. So, TD, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing your stories. We spent a lot of time before we press record, and I really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you about the work that you're doing.
Thank you, John. It's been a privilege to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.